The Kenyan government offered to send 1,000 police officers to Haiti to combat gang violence, political instability, and humanitarian crisis. And this is what we are working with today. The pledge from Kenya was welcomed by officials in Haiti. In case you didn't know, last year the current prime minister in Haiti requested the international community to send a specialized armed force to address the crisis caused by blockade of the country's main fuel ports that led to the crippling shortages. However, the announcement from Nairobi also sparked concerns among human rights groups who say the move could worsen the security situation in Haiti. I rarely agree with these human rights groups, but when I do, it means something is fishy. And today we've learned that Kenya has signed a defense agreement with the US, which will provide resources and support for its security deployment, as well as allow the US to establish a permanent military base in Kenya. At least the US personnel of Imperialism won't feel too isolated because their cousins, the British Armed Forces, are already there and they will show them around. I was already against this idea of African countries participating in something like this through the sponsorship of the US, but now I am brutally opposed to this madness, but we'll get to the why in a bit. This is almost like buying a house in Western countries. The house is not yours yet, but the lawyer and the banks have already started eating. The US has the game on lock and only they are scoring goals, because how does this benefit Kenya or Haiti? What do we know so far? Well, the mission is pending approval of the UN Security Council, and we know the US and the UN, one and the same, have been urging them to support this deployment. What else do we know? The UN has been successful in failing its peacekeeping mission in Haiti and across the African continent. Let's not forget they've been accused of human rights abuses, sexual exploitation of all gender and ages, and they were also accused of causing the cholera outbreak. There is a whole video about this incident somewhere on YouTube. If you remove the cholera outbreak, the UN peacekeepers face the same accusations across the African continent. But what else do we know? Historically speaking, for decades, the US has been meddling in the affairs of Haiti, imposing, supporting corrupt and oppressive regimes, orchestrating coups, and dropping all kinds of sanctions on the Caribbean island. Like a mature elephant leaning on a goat with all its weight, but the goat has the heart of a tiger. The Kenyan government should not follow these steps that have shown little regards for the sovereignty and the dignity of Haiti and its people. What more do we know? The language barrier. In Kenya, people speak English and Kiswahili, not to mention the many other Bantu languages spoken in the country. Meanwhile, in Haiti, the official languages are French and Creole. You see, a multilingual person like myself will blend in like a drop of water in both countries. But in this situation, the same can't be said about both parties, Kenya and Haiti. Considering the local population's history with peacekeepers, I believe there is no room for mistakes when it comes to communication with people who may not welcome foreign intervention. Let's not forget, the people of Haiti were in the street protesting against foreign military intervention. This means Kenyan forces could become the target of attacks from armed gangs and possibly face anti-foreign troops protests. The thousands Kenyans will have to navigate the complex situation in Haiti with the same focus and care as a man crossing a crocodile-infested river while stepping on slippery rocks. They will have to stay neutral and not lean toward one political party or the other, because it could affect their credibility. The country has been without a president since the assassination of Jovenel Moïse in July 2021. It is the Prime Minister Ariel Henry who is currently serving as acting president. However, I don't think there will be a massive culture shock. We are Africans. We were born on the continent with over 2,000 spoken languages and over 3,000 ethnic groups, so I'm not worried about that. But back to the story. The root causes of the problems in Haiti cannot and will not be addressed by Kenya. How can Kenya address foreign interference? Poor wages of police officers, because it's the same in Kenya. Unemployment and poverty, because it's the same in Kenya and across Africa. Political instability and more. A lot of these factors are interrelated and mutually reinforcing, which create a vicious circle of instability and suffering. Side note, I do not believe there is a correlation between poverty and crime, but that's a topic for another time. The Kenyan government should not contribute to this cycle of madness because we are repeating the same things over and over, and people act surprised that things are not improving. That's the definition of insanity. This doesn't just apply to Haiti but to Africa at large. We have used force following the advice of people who benefit from us buying their weapons. However, when was the last time we waged war on making sure the basic needs of the people were met? Small things like food security, healthcare, education, job creation, and opportunity creations. We have invested billions in fighting fire with fire for decades. Why not try something new? The US is trying to secure $100 million funding for this mission. So you mean to tell me $100 million cannot improve the living condition of the people of the island? It kind of reminds me of the stories we often hear from the continent. You would hear someone who died in hospital because people couldn't raise enough fund to pay for the hospital bills, but more money was raised in a short period of time for the funeral. We need Haitian solutions for Haitian problems, and African countries should instead support and empower Haitian institutions to work for the people of Haiti. We should be supporting peaceful and inclusive dialogues amongst the people of Haiti, as well as humanitarian and development assistance that respect the people's ownership and agencies. Listen, Kenya Defense Agreement with the US with provision for the US to establish a permanent military base in the country is happening at a time when countries on the continent are trying to get rid of these military bases. I mean, the US already has enough military bases on the continent. I think at this rate, we should all be hosting at least 1 or 2 US soldiers in our houses or let them sit on our laps. Yes, it will enhance the US strategic presence and influence in the region, but what's in it for Kenya? Money? How about the risks that comes with having a US military base in your country? On top of all these challenges that Kenya already has, it has gone out of its way to add another one. As stated earlier, the US has the game on lock and only they are scoring goals because how does this benefit Kenya? In conclusion, I think Kenya should reconsider its offer and withdraw its proposal to send troops to Haiti and refuse to be used as a pawn by Western powers for their geopolitical games. I understand many countries want to play a bigger role in global issues, but Kenya should act in its own interest and in solidarity with the people of Haiti, not in solidarity with the agendas of the US. If it's your first time interacting with my content, I would like to welcome you and let you know that I have a podcast on YouTube full of non-political stories. You can find it in the podcast sections of the channel. I also have a book of Proverbs which you can access through the link below. Moreover, I create fire content that speaks for itself. Please check out my catalog and thank you for your time.
We, ni nini?